A while ago, I made this video about Willow, and her unsatisfactory abilities and lack of a niche in Don't Starve Together. This was, of course, long before Willow actually received her Skilltree update that she now has. In this video, I made a number of predictions as to possible things Clay could include to revitalize her character, and they were weirdly accurate, like really scarily kind of accurate, which I guess makes it official. I'm a medium now. Now, just imagine what I could do if I was a large. So I thought, why not put my newfound powers to the test and attempt to predict the remaining skill trees yet to be added to the game. Unfortunately, I have missed the opportunity to predict Walter, Wartox, and Wendy's trees since they are currently in beta. But many of the juiciest predictions are still out there in the ephemeral clouds, and I must cleverly utilize my crystallized sphere to scry them out from the ether. Today's first prediction is for WX78, the Mechanical Menace. WX78 is an interesting case for a few reasons. One, and this is somewhat of a trend for multiple other characters in this video, they don't need a skill tree in the way that some past characters have. WX feels, at least to me, more or less complete. The circuit system lets you create a custom build, and skills would possibly interfere with this ability ecosystem, since they aren't as readily customizable as the circuits are. Despite this, I still think that all characters should obviously still get a skill tree, but WX's lack of need for more abilities and power does make accurate predictions somewhat more difficult. Still, I will press on with my newly acquired future-telling skills. It could be possible to see some skills that augment specific circuits, much like another autonomous character with a skill tree I could name, give you more circuit slots, or increase circuit customizability in some other way. Having skills that grant WX more buildable circuits would feel kind of silly, since that would segregate some circuits behind skills while the others use the already existing progression system of scanning creatures in the world. An idea could be hiding a super version of some modules behind a skill. Again, no idea where I could have possibly gotten that idea from. These super circuits could have a limited durability while plugged in, or they could even drain WX78's health, constantly degrading from surges of high voltage. In exchange, they would provide an extremely helpful benefit, most likely to do with combat. A few years ago, this piece of concept art from Clay was doing the rounds online. Yeah, I think I know what everyone's thinking here. The cerebral energy is strong with this prediction because a mech would be fucking awesome. I'm not 100% sure on how it could fit into the robot's existing abilities. Maybe you can slot circuits into the mech to give it their benefits instead of you, at a greatly increased capacity, but in exchange the mech is slow or requires fuel or something like that. The mech could even be the central focus of the skill tree, with unlockable hot swappable arms for different functionalities, like resource harvesting, combat, or solar charging. Having synergy with WX78's dynamic build system would be a perfect fit, since that seems to be their dominant theme since the character refreshes. Not only that, but additions that benefit from the circuit system without unnecessarily adding to it or overriding it would be perfect for a skill tree. And above all else, mechs are fucking cool. While the WX78 mech is unfortunately completely unattainable, at least for now, I can name one other high-tech device to aid in revolutionizing your gameplay experience. The Gamesir Cyclone 2 is an exceptional game controller, boasting many brilliant features at a great price. My personal favorite aspect of the Cyclone 2 is the button feel. Not only do all the face buttons, analog sticks, and the triggers feel clicky, responsive, and extremely ergonomic to use, but the triggers and sticks also feature Hall effect sensors, ensuring not only a long lifespan, but also lower latency, helping you maximize your potential in-game. And I'd be remiss not to mention the wireless/Bluetooth connectivity and charging dock. Not having to worry about getting tangled up in cables and wires is incredibly freeing whilst using the Cyclone 2. Plus, the dock makes for the perfect place to store it and show it off while it's not in use. If you like the sound of augmenting your gameplay with the attractive Cyclone 2, with or without its charging dock, check the description for links to nab one for yourself. Thanks to Gamesir for sponsoring this video. Now, my crystal ball itches for another swirling prediction into the future. Prediction number 2 is Wickerbottom, a character whom I have no strong feelings about. Her character rework from Days of Yore literally just added more books, which is fairly uninteresting. I couldn't imagine her skill tree doing the exact same thing again, as that would be a bit ridiculous. Maybe her bookcase could receive some augmentations that buff her book casting abilities temporarily. This could add some depth to the existing books, of which I would say there's a load of quantity but not much in the way of quality. Maybe the boosted cast mechanic from the Forge can make a return, in which Wicker's next book gets a unique, increased effect after she fulfills some sort of in-game requirement, like spending time near a bookcase. It could also be interesting to see her Science Boost perk expanded upon. This perk of Wicker's grants her an extra tier of science for free without having to craft a research station, letting her make science machine recipes right out the gate. Obviously, past about day 10, this perk has little impact on the game. Maybe she can clone rare blueprints so that multiple players can use them. Maybe she can create normal blueprints out of thin air. Or she could obtain a way to share her already learned crafting recipes with other players who might have just joined the server. To be honest, Wicker is a little hard to make predictions for, since I'm honestly not really sure what her role in a server realistically is, apart from book dispenser so that Maxwell can read them. So these are probably some of my weakest predictions, unfortunately. If, hypothetically, there was ever a mod character who looked suspiciously like me, a potential skill tree that would be really cool could involve a special ability for each playable tape that the character has, a craftable storage that gives tapes a chance to have no usage cost, and some really cool affinity Wait, hang on. I'm still getting the hang of this medium thing. Turns out this isn't a prediction. This is all stuff that already exists. My mistake. Maxwell is a very tricky tree to predict. This is because, unsurprisingly, he's not only an incredibly powerful character already, deservedly so of course, but also another one who can be viewed as complete. I have little idea as to what could reasonably be added to his kit that wouldn't be completely unnecessary, but I will try. Also, the nightmare fuel fumes are obstructing my clairvoyance device, clearly. With some of the most recent skill trees, like Walter's and Wartox's, we're seeing an increase in really interesting sub-skill tree systems, like Walter's badges and Wartox's naughty or nice mechanic. Since Maxwell has probably one of the most anticipated skill trees in the whole game, I suspect he'll receive a unique mechanic in this vein. Likely it'll be to do with his shadow affinity, since that's sort of Maxwell's whole theme. I can imagine him deepening his relationship with the shadows, maybe even putting his life on the line in exchange, exacerbating his glass cannon trait of low health, by even further decreasing his HP maximum, or kneecapping the effectiveness of armor, or something like that. Of course, something as drastic as that would be completely optional. Perhaps there would be a choice between two paths like what Wartox has. Sacrifice less of your survivability, and maybe you receive more of a focus on Maxwell's resource harvesting or even a new support side. On this more passive side of Maxwell's tree, it could be cool to see a return of some of his abilities and items from adventure mode, such as Maxwell's mosquito mines and tooth traps, possibly in the form of a Codex Umbra spell, Maxwell's lights, his adventure mode cloak, or even the teleportation that he seemingly possesses, although that might be slightly stepping on Wanda's toes. On the offensive glass cannon side, I'm sure there are endless possibilities for more combat-centric shadow abilities. Some that use health as a casting resource instead of max sanity could be quite interesting. Losing sanity only has so many impacts on the game. Either you're insane or you aren't. But losing health on the other hand, well, that could certainly give Maxwell another layer of dynamic gameplay, by well and truly crippling the frail old man in exchange for blowing things up spectacularly. Weber, contrasting from many other characters featured in this video, is someone who I feel could actually benefit from being reduced somewhat. Other characters like Wendy and Maxwell can easily control their minions through the use of a single item, containing a spell wheel with a variety of actions. Weber does not have such a luxury in his kit. Instead, he must craft and continually hold on to the Webby Whistle, the Shoebox, the Healing Glop, and Monster Meat if he wishes to recruit, manage, and heal them. I'm not sure if it's within the scope of a skill tree update or if this is even a good prediction, but it sure would be nice if these items were unified into a singular spell wheel thing that Weber could use to painlessly manage his arachnid entourage. As a more skill tree relevant guess, I could definitely see Weber receiving more tools or abilities to help his spiders survive in groups. Currently, anything with any sort of AoE will decimate all your spider pals at once. Sure, you can use nurse spiders to heal them, but if the spiders die in 2 hits, that will only help so much. This ability could materialize in one of many ways. Maybe it's part of Weber's soon-to-be spell wheel. Maybe it's a consumable that you throw onto your spiders. Or it could simply just be a passive perk that's permanently applied to all spiders you befriend. Something like giving tamed spiders a shared health pool so they don't all get wiped out in milliseconds is an ability that Weber frankly needs. Wirt is basically Weber but cooler, and there are many possibilities that can hopefully bring Weber's power level up towards hers. Though I do predict, and hope, that they will take him in a different direction to her, which may prove to be surprisingly difficult as Wirt kind of does it all. Combat, boss combat, resource gathering, you name it. Other things I predict Weber may receive are more support spider mutations, which may or may not tie into the previous suggestion. These could provide multiple buffs to Weber's spiders that could further assist in increasing their strength, or with unique combat abilities like more range attack spiders. Ultimately, there are many possibilities for Weber, and I feel as though his tree will be one of those ones more geared towards increasing a character's power level more than anything else, as ideally he should be more of a counterpart to Wirt instead of a crippled version of her. Of all the characters bound to get a skill tree in the future, who could forget the iconic Wonkey? Wally is another character whom I feel is in a similar spot to Weber in terms of power. He's often used as nothing more than a spice and recipe dispenser for certain other characters. Personally, I do think Wally's gameplay loop is a fun and challenging one, taking the game's name and turning it into a more prominent challenge that affects your run all the time. But like Weber, he sort of does lack in power, especially compared to the power level that can be obtained by giving his dishes to other, already powerful characters. This isn't that big of a deal, but from what I've seen, Wally does seem like a fairly unpopular character to actually play. There are definitely some things about Wally's kit that do bug me, mostly to do with the spice system. Spices needing their own dedicated crafting station that must be carried around, and another completely separate machine whose sole purpose is to apply spices to dishes is kind of silly. This is a lot of things to carry around just to access the character's perks. Again, a similar issue to Weber. Maybe this is outside the scope of a skill tree yet again, but it would be really nice to see some reduction in Wally's spicing process. Also, when you cook a dish, you're supposed to add spices while the dish cooks so the flavors can properly meld in with the ingredients, not sprinkle them on top after the fact with an over-engineered salt shaker. Maybe Wally's portable crockpot could have an extra spice slot that you can optionally use, alongside the ingredients, to create a spice dish. Or you could just have the ability to add them by hand, without a station that must be placed, used, and then picked up again. I know it isn't really the point of the skill trees, but I don't think Clay should be afraid to redesign aspects of characters that might need touching up, like Weber's spider management or Wally's seasoning system. Doing that might help with the skill trees feeling less like something that's tacked on afterwards, much like Wally's spices are to his dishes, and more like something integrated naturally into the character. Maybe that's a hot take, I don't know, but it feels to me like the skill tree system limits the possible changes a character can receive outside of an update centered around them. Oh, predictions. I consulteth my crystal ball and reveal more spices. Unlike other characters, I feel as though Wally could actually benefit from some skill-locked spices that have some extreme effects. Another prediction is a way to create a huge area of effect of a given spice power, which could buff all allies who stand inside it with the effect. This may reduce Wally's need to micromanage spicing dishes, and instead could let him spontaneously throw them out into combat with less prior thought required, making him into a combat support character that requires less pre-planning and careful coordination, something which Wally already has to deal with all the time outside of combat. Finally, we have Wanda. Wanda's potential skill tree predictions are difficult for the same reasons that Maxwell's were. Clock Lady is already quite powerful. Her also being a shadow magic themed character gives her a surprising amount of overlap with Maxwell. That and the fact that they're both old. Well, most of the time. Something that would be cool to see for Wanda is some more content to do with her time theming. Outside of her health bar and her health restoring clocks, Wanda's abilities are seemingly more focused on teleportation than outright time manipulation. I predict some abilities focused around this theme. Maybe instead of more clocks, she gains some abilities to augment her existing timekeepers with time-dilating powers. For example, imagine getting a temporary effect that slows enemies down in a time bubble while using your ageless watch to heal, giving you a little bit of breathing room on top of the healing. The same effect could also apply to allies after they get revived with the second chance watch, letting them safely recoup with the added protection from enemies. Teleportation clocks could have the opposite effect, dilating time in the reverse direction around you after using them, effectively boosting your speed on top of the teleportation effect. And if the alarming clock plays into this, it could briefly apply a time dilation slowdown effect to enemies it hits. But that may be too much. It's not like that thing needs to be any more powerful beyond the addition of planar damage. As for other out-of-combat time-themed abilities, something that passively enhances anything in the game that involves waiting could be interesting. My mind goes to the golden clock structure from Stardew Valley that stops your fences from degrading and debris appearing on your farm. It could be interesting to have a clock structure that Wanda can craft that would very gently increase how quickly crops and resources grow in a certain area. Or, maybe instead of a structure, it could be a new craftable clock to gently increase time flow around plants and other resources. There are plenty of ways that Wanda could benefit out of combat gameplay by increasing or decreasing how quickly time flows around particular objects. Not only would this be thematically coherent, it would also synergize with resource gathering characters like Woody or Maxwell, who could benefit from the faster growth of their crops. Finally, as a bit of a random idea, it could be interesting to see some more perks to do with Wanda's age. Some of her abilities' effects change slightly depending on Wanda's current age. Shadow weapons deal more damage while she's old, and the backstep watch's teleport distance will also change slightly. I definitely feel like this could be expanded upon. Maybe the time dilation effects that I predicted will be more potent, but with a smaller radius when Wanda is old. I don't know, I just feel like this is sort of an underutilized aspect of her character. So, this isn't a bit, I promise, but I genuinely forgot about Wes until I was about halfway through editing this video. I have no idea how this happened, but for some reason I must have just mentally blanked on, Wes's existence. Poor Wes, always getting the short end of the stick. So, to make up for this horrible brain fog incident, I have 3 major predictions for what Wes's skill tree could add to his gameplay. That's 1.5 times more than normal. Number 1. Nothing. Wes's skill tree could very well be a total meme and contain absolutely nothing of gameplay value. Skills that give him things like +5 extra balloon shapes, or a 20% increase to his lungs' helium output, or other things like that. It would be extremely funny, and no matter what the outcome of his skill tree is, I do sincerely hope he gets some more silly balloons to mess around with, like the party balloon. Silly, pointless things are ultimately the essence of Wes, and it'd be great to see some more of that. Number 2. Marginally useful balloon perks. Wes does possess one balloon that is genuinely useful, that being the speedy balloon, so him receiving more balloons or abilities that utilize his infinite supply of helium for good is within the realm of possibility. Would it be as funny as the other options? No. It could be possible to see some more balloons that are somewhat useful, like the balloon gear, but mostly are just there for the funnies and for the ha-has. Number 3. Perks that sacrifice Wes's survival abilities in exchange for boosting others. It's a bit obscure, but Wes has a perk that makes lightning more likely to target him and increases the chance that hounds will attack him instead of other allies. These are some interesting perks and could possibly be expanded into his skill tree or a branch of his skill tree. Skills could range from reducing Wes's effectiveness with, say, tools in exchange for buffing his teammates' effectiveness with the same thing. Or he could grant his teammates a long-lasting buff effect if he dies, like bonus revenge damage and or movement speed, making Wes more useful dead than he is alive. This could be a really fun addition to Wes's gameplay. For players looking to cripple and thereby challenge themselves further, it could be a fantastic way to make survival much more difficult, and with the added side bonus of bolstering your teammates' abilities, even more so once you inevitably die. And that's just about it for my skill tree predictions. It'll be interesting to see how well they hold up when these characters do receive their trees. But if I was to predict how well my predictions will predict, I would guess not very well. Willow was an easy character to anticipate because she had clear holes in the role she fulfilled, and making her a fire witch is a pretty predictable way to add more combat power to her. If I was to rank my predictions in this video in order of likelihood, I would put WX78's first, thanks to that concept art, and Weber's and Worley's last. For those latter two, I found it difficult to think of good additions that complement their existing abilities, instead of simply just adding more of what they already have. Notably, I do predict these two will both receive big power increases in their trees, due to their lack of strength when compared to certain other characters in similar niches. Be sure to share your thoughts on my predictions, or even make some of your own in the comments section. But for now, that's everything. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.